Legendary Losses Unveiled. Welcome to History Nerd, where we unearth the untold stories of history's forgotten, its heroes, and its most spectacular failures. I'm your host, a passionate explorer of the past, and today we're diving into a gripping journey through time to uncover the legendary losses, biggest losers in history. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join our community of history enthusiasts as we explore the raw, unfiltered truths of the past. Leave a comment to share your thoughts, and let's embark on this journey together. This is History Nerd, and today we're asking, what does it mean to lose on a historic scale? History is often written by the victors, their triumphs carved into stone, their names echoing through the ages. But what of the losers, those whose failures reshaped empires, economies, and cultures? A loser, in this context, isn't just a John or Jane Average who stumbles. It's a figure of power whose epic fall reverberates through history. Their losses can be catastrophic, like a medieval ruler who provoked Genghis Khan and saw his empire reduced to ash, or more subtle, like a music executive who passed on the biggest band in history, forever staining his legacy. These are the stories of ambition, hubris, and miscalculation, moments where the mighty fell, dragging millions down with them or leaving a legacy of ridicule. Consider the stakes. A single decision can topple an empire, as it did for the Han Dynasty in China, where warlords unleashed chaos that fractured a once mighty realm, or a battlefield blunder, like Darius III's panicked flight at Gaugamela, which handed Alexander the Great the Persian Empire. Sometimes the loss is financial, as with the Hunt brothers, whose silver market scheme led to the largest personal bankruptcy in US history. Other times, it's a matter of pride, like Franz Reichelt, who leapt from the Eiffel Tower in a failed parachute suit, his courage outstripping his sense. These losses aren't just personal, they're seismic, reshaping the course of history, economies, and societies. In this series, we'll journey across centuries and continents, from the crumbling courts of ancient China to the smoky studios of 1960s London, from the battlefields of Gaugamela to the frozen streets of Moscow during Napoleon's retreat. We'll meet Cao Cao, a warlord whose naval defeat at Red Cliffs shattered his dream of reunifying China, and Dick Rowe, the Decca Records executive who rejected the Beatles, branding himself the biggest loser in music history. We'll witness General Friedrich von Romberg surrender a fortified city to a tiny French force, and Shah Muhammad II provoke Genghis Khan, inviting the destruction of his Khwarezmian empire. Each story is a lesson in hubris, misjudgment, and the fragility of power. To set the stage, let's understand the broader historical context of failure. In ancient societies, loss often meant annihilation. Empires like the Khwarezmian or Abbasid Caliphate were erased by Mongol wrath, their cities burned, their people massacred. In medieval Europe, a leader like Vortigern, who hired Saxon mercenaries only to be betrayed, saw his land conquered, his culture displaced. In the modern era, losses became financial or reputational. Think of the Hunt brothers' silver market, Crash or Coca-Cola's failure to buy Pepsi, which birthed a rival giant. Yet across all eras, the common thread is human error. Overconfidence, ignorance, or sheer bad luck, amplified by the stakes of power. The settings of these losses are as vivid as the stories themselves. Picture the Subura-like chaos of ancient China's warlord era, where Cao Cao's chained ships burned on the Yangtze River, or the dusty plains of Gaugamela, where Darius III's army crumbled under Alexander's cavalry charge. Imagine the smoky Decca studios in 1962 London, where the Beatles played to an unimpressed Dick Rowe, or the icy streets of Paris in 1912, where Franz Reichelt's fatal jump drew gasps from a crowd. These are the stages of history's greatest failures, and we'll bring them to life with every detail: the smell of smoke, the clash of steel, the weight of a decision gone wrong. At History Nerd, we're committed to uncovering these stories, giving voice to the losers who shaped history, as much as the victors. As you watch, reflect on the cost of hubris, the price of miscalculation, and the resilience of those who faced the fallout. Like, comment, and subscribe to join us on this journey, and share your thoughts. What other historic losses should we explore? This is History Nerd, where the past comes alive, and no story is too big or too disastrous to tell. Let's step into the annals of failure, where the mighty fall and history turns on a single, catastrophic choice. The Han Dynasty's collapse and Cao Cao's Red Cliff's defeat. The Han Dynasty of China, reigning from 202 BC to 220 AD, was a golden age of culture, governance, and innovation, often compared to Rome for its grandeur. Its capitals, Chang'an and later Luoyang, buzzed with life. Merchants traded silk along the Silk Road, scholars penned Confucian texts, and emperors ruled with divine mandate. But by the late 2nd century AD, the dynasty was crumbling, its foundations eroded by corruption, famine, and rebellion. The air in Luoyang was thick with the stench of decay, rotting grain in imperial granaries, unburied bodies from famines, and the acrid smoke of burning villages. The Yellow Turban Rebellion of 184 AD, led by the Taoist mystic Zhang Jue, swept through the empire like wildfire, its followers in yellow scarves chanting for a new era. The imperial armies, once a disciplined force, were now a shadow of their former selves, riddled with corruption and desertion, powerless to quell the uprisings. In a desperate bid to restore order, the Han government made a fateful decision. They called for regional strongmen to raise private armies and crush the rebels. These strongmen, men of ambition like Dong Zhuo and Yuan Shao, answered the call, defeating the Yellow Turbans by 185 AD. But the cure was worse than the disease. With their private armies, these strongmen turned into warlords, carving out de facto independent fiefdoms. The emperors, once divine rulers, were reduced to puppets, their edicts ignored as warlords fought amongst themselves. The Han Empire fractured, its unity a distant memory, as the countryside became a patchwork of warring states. Peasants fled their fields, bandits roamed the roads, and the Silk Road trade faltered, leaving markets empty and cities starving. Amid this chaos, a warlord named Cao Cao, alternatively Cao Cao, 155–220 AD, rose to prominence. Born in Qiao, modern-day Bozhou, Anhui, Cao Cao was a man of ruthless ambition and brilliant strategy, a poet and general whose name would echo through Chinese history. He began his career as a minor official, but his military prowess shone during the Yellow Turban campaigns. By 196 AD, he had seized control of the emperor, Xian, effectively ruling northern China in the emperor's name. Cao Cao's court in Ye was a stark contrast to the crumbling Luoyang. His soldiers drilled relentlessly, his granaries were stocked, and his spies kept him informed of every rival's move. He defeated warlords like Yuan Shao at the Battle of Guandu in 200 AD, a masterstroke of strategy where his 20,000 men outmaneuvered Yuan's 100,000 through superior tactics and espionage. With the north under his control, Cao Cao turned his gaze south, aiming to reunify China under Han rule, or more likely, under his own. His rivals, southern warlords Sun Quan and Liu Bei, controlled the fertile lands along the Yangtze River, a vital waterway for trade and defense. In 208 AD, Cao Cao marched south with an army he claimed numbered 800,000, though modern estimates suggest around 250,000, a massive force nonetheless. Sun Quan and Liu Bei, allied against him, could muster only 50,000 men combined. The odds seemed overwhelmingly in Cao Cao's favor as he arrived at the Yangtze, assembling a fleet to support his campaign. The river's waters shimmered under the summer sun, its banks lined with reeds and fishing boats. But the northern warlord faced a critical weakness. His men, land-bound northerners, were unfamiliar with naval warfare. Cao Cao's enemies exploited this vulnerability with cunning deception. A southern agent, posing as a loyal advisor, convinced Cao Cao to chain his ships together, claiming it would stabilize them and reduce his soldiers' seasickness. Then, a southern admiral feigned defection, offering to join Cao Cao with his fleet. The northern warlord, eager for an advantage, welcomed the defectors, unaware that their ships were fire ships, packed with flammable materials like pitch and dried reeds. On a windy night at the Battle of Red Cliffs near modern-day Wuhan, the skeleton crews sailed the fire ships close to Cao Cao's fleet, set them ablaze, and escaped in small boats. The wind carried the flaming vessels into the chained northern fleet, which, unable to maneuver, became a floating inferno. The sky turned crimson, the air thick with smoke, and the screams of burning men as Cao Cao's navy was reduced to ash. The defeat was catastrophic. Cao Cao's retreat turned into a rout, his army harried by southern forces and plagued by disease and starvation. Historical records, like the records of the Three Kingdoms, suggest that of his 250,000 men, fewer than half survived the campaign. The dream of reunifying China died on the Yangtze, and the empire split into three kingdoms: Wei in the north, under Cao Cao, Shu in the southwest under Liu Bei, and Wu in the southeast under Sun Quan. This period, known as the Three Kingdoms, 220–280 AD, became one of China's most romanticized eras, immortalized in the 14th century novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Cao Cao, once a hero who reunited the North, became an epic loser, his ambition undone by a single battle. His legacy, however, is complex. While he failed to unify China, his state of Wei laid the groundwork for the eventual reunification under the Jin dynasty in 280 AD. Let's delve into the cultural and social context of the late Han dynasty. The Yellow Turban Rebellion wasn't just a military uprising. It was a symptom of deeper societal unrest. The Han's land distribution system had concentrated wealth in the hands of powerful families, leaving peasants destitute and vulnerable to famine. The Taiping Taoist sect, which inspired the rebellion, promised a utopian great peace, resonating with the disenfranchised. Court eunuchs, wielding undue influence, further destabilized the government, alienating the scholar officials who traditionally advised the emperor. Meanwhile, Cao Cao's military strategies, such as his use of espionage and psychological warfare, reflect the evolving nature of warfare in this period, where loyalty was scarce and betrayal was common. The Battle of Red Cliffs also highlights
the strategic importance of the Yangtze, a lifeline for southern economies, and the role of naval warfare in Chinese history, which would later influence dynasties like the Song and Ming.
Alexander versus Darius III at Gaugamela. The Persian Empire in 331 BC was a colossus, stretching from Egypt to India, its capitals of Persepolis and Susa glittering with gold and lapis lazuli. Darius III, the King of Kings, ruled over a diverse realm of satrapies, where Greek mercenaries, Indian elephants, and Persian immortals mingled in a tapestry of cultures. But the empire was faltering, its bureaucracy bloated, its satraps rebellious, and its army, though vast, plagued by disunity. On October 1st, 331 BC, Darius III faced his greatest challenge on the dusty plains of Gaugamela, near modern-day Dohuk in Iraqi Kurdistan. His opponent was Alexander the Great, the young Macedonian king whose ambition knew no bounds, and who had already defeated Darius 2 years earlier at the Battle of Issus in 333 BC, where the Persian monarch fled in disgrace. Darius III commanded a massive force. Estimates range from 52,000 to 120,000 men, including cavalry, infantry, scythed chariots, and even war elephants, though their use at Gaugamela is debated. Alexander, by contrast, led 47,000 Macedonians and Greeks, a disciplined army forged through years of conquest. The battlefield was a flat expanse, carefully chosen by Darius to favor his numerical advantage and chariots. The Persian king positioned himself at the center of his line, surrounded by his elite immortals, with cavalry on both flanks and chariots in front, their blades gleaming under the morning sun. The air was thick with dust, the scent of sweat and leather mingling with the metallic tang of polished armor. Alexander, ever the tactician, devised a plan to exploit the Persian formation. He took his elite companion cavalry and most of his horsemen, riding parallel to the Persian line toward the right flank.
To protect his cavalry from the Persian chariots, he positioned a scratch force of infantry as a screen. As Alexander moved, Persian cavalry shadowed him, aiming to prevent an outflank on their left. This was exactly what Alexander wanted. He
had concealed light infantry behind his cavalry, hidden by the dust clouds kicked up by hooves. The Persian cavalry, outmaneuvered, eventually charged, thinking they had outflanked Alexander. But this created a gap in the Persian line, directly where Darius stood. Seizing the moment, Alexander disengaged his companion cavalry, formed them into a wedge, and charged through the gap straight at Darius. The Persian king, seeing the Macedonian king bearing down with a furious cavalry charge, panicked. He had fled at Issus, and now, at Gaugamela, he fled again, abandoning his army and his empire. The Persian forces, leaderless, collapsed into chaos, and Alexander's troops cut them down. Though exact casualties are uncertain, ancient sources like Arrian claim tens of thousands of Persians died, while Alexander lost fewer than 1,000. The battle marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire. Alexander captured Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, burning the latter in a symbolic act of conquest. Darius III became a tragic loser, his empire lost through his inability to stand and fight. He fled eastward, hoping to rally support, but was betrayed and killed by his own satrap, Bessus, in 330 BC. Alexander, honoring his fallen foe, gave Darius a royal burial, cementing his own legend as the conqueror of Persia. Gaugamela wasn't just a military defeat. It was a cultural turning point, ushering in the Hellenistic Age, where Greek culture blended with Persian traditions, influencing art, science, and governance for centuries. Let's explore the broader context of the Persian Empire's decline. The Achaemenid system, while innovative, satraps governed provinces with relative autonomy, suffered from corruption and disloyalty by Darius's time. The empire's reliance on diverse, often unmotivated troops contrasted with Alexander's unified, highly trained phalanx and cavalry. Daily life in Persia under Darius was a mix of opulence and hardship. Nobles feasted on pomegranates and saffron-infused rice, while peasants toiled under heavy taxes. The battle also reflects the psychological warfare of the era. Alexander's reputation for invincibility unnerved Darius, whose flight demoralized his troops. Archaeological evidence from Gaugamela, including arrowheads and chariot wheel fragments, underscores the battle's scale, while Persian art, like the reliefs at Persepolis, reveals the empire's grandeur before its fall. Dick Rowe and the Beatles' rejection London in 1962 was a city on the cusp of cultural revolution, its streets alive with the hum of post-war optimism and the beat of emerging rock and roll. The city's West End buzzed with theatre-goers, while Soho's jazz clubs pulsed with new sounds. At the heart of Britain's music industry stood Decca Records, a powerhouse label helmed by Richard Dick Rowe, its head of A&R. Rowe was a titan of the industry, a man whose ear for talent had shaped the 1950s and 60s British music scene. His signings included the Rolling Stones, Tom Jones, Cat Stevens, The Animals, and Them, launching Van Morrison's career. But on New Year's Day 1962, Rowe made a decision that would brand him the biggest loser in music history, a decision that began with a snowy journey from Liverpool. A young manager named Brian Epstein had secured an audition for his unheralded band at Decca's studios in West Hampstead, North London. The group, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Pete Best, Ringo Starr would join later, called themselves the Silver Beatles, soon to become the Beatles. They had driven through a snowstorm, their van rattling over icy roads, arriving just in time for their 11 a.m. slot. The air in London was crisp, the streets dusted with snow, the city still nursing a New Year's hangover. But their host, Mike Smith, a Decca A&R subordinate, arrived late, having partied the night before. His tardiness rattled the band, as did his insistence that they use Decca's amplifiers instead of their own, which he deemed inferior. The Beatles performed about 15 songs, a mix of covers and originals, their voices echoing in the cold. Studio, the scent of cigarette smoke and damp wool lingering in the air. They were nervous, exhausted from the drive, unsettled by Smith's demeanor and unfamiliar with the equipment, but they believed they'd done enough to impress. Dick. Rowe, however, was underwhelmed. Watching from the control room, he found their performance lackluster, their sound unpolished. With a dismissive wave, he remarked to Epstein, "Guitar groups are on the way out, Mr. Epstein." That same day, Rowe auditioned another band, Brian Poole and the Tremolos, a local group from London. He liked their polished sound and signed them instead, reasoning they'd be easier to work with than the Liverpool boys. The Tremolos found success, charting with covers like Twist and Shout and Do You Love Me, but their achievements paled in comparison to what Rowe had rejected. The Beatles, dejected, left Decca's studios, their dreams seemingly dashed. But Epstein's persistence led them to EMI's Parlophone label, where producer George Martin saw their potential. By 1963, the Beatles were a global phenomenon, their hits like Love Me Do and She Loves You igniting Beatlemania. They revolutionized music, selling over 600 million records worldwide, a record unmatched to this day. Rowe's rejection became legendary, a cautionary tale of missed opportunity. He later claimed he regretted the decision, but the label stuck. Dick Rowe, the man who passed on the Beatles, was history's biggest loser in the music industry. London was a melting pot of influences. American rock and roll, British skiffle, and jazz mingled in smoky clubs like the Marquee and the Two Eyes Coffee Bar. The Beatles' early sound, honed in Liverpool's Cavern Club and Hamburg's Reeperbahn, was raw but innovative, blending Chuck Berry riffs with Everly Brothers harmonies. Decca's rejection reflected a broader industry trend. Executives favored safe, polished acts over untested talent. Rowe's decision also highlights the role of A&R in the pre-digital era, where gatekeepers like him held immense power over artists' fates. Historical context, like the impact of Beatlemania on global youth culture, the economic boom of the 1960s, and the rise of vinyl records, will add depth to the narrative. General Friedrich von Romberg's surrender at Stettin. The year 1806 was a dark one for Prussia, a kingdom once renowned for its military might under Frederick the Great. The Battle of Jena-Auerstedt, fought on October 14, 1806, shattered Prussian forces, leaving them a demoralized mob retreating from Napoleon's relentless advance. The air in Prussia was thick with the scent of defeat, burning villages, the musk of gunpowder, and the despair of a nation on the brink. Napoleon, determined to crush Prussia before they could link with their Russian allies, ordered a vigorous pursuit, targeting Prussian garrisons to prevent their regrouping. One such garrison was in the fortified port city of Stettin, modern-day Szczecin, Poland, a key Baltic stronghold well supplied by the British Royal Navy, its docks bustling with ships laden with grain and munitions. General Friedrich Gisbert, Wilhelm von Romberg, a veteran of over 50 years, commanded Stettin's garrison of nearly 10,000 men and 281 cannons. Romberg's career stretched back to the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, where he fought under Frederick the Great, earning scars and honors in battles like Leuthen. Now, at 78, he was a relic of a bygone era, his once sharp mind dulled by age, his strategies rooted in outdated tactics. Stettin's walls were formidable, its granaries stocked, its cannons primed. On paper, it was impregnable. But on October 29, 1806, a French cavalry brigade under General Antoine Lassalle approached, a force of just 500 hussars and 2 light field guns, a fraction of Stettin's strength. Lassalle, a daring and theatrical commander known for his bravado, sent a subordinate under a flag of truce to demand Stettin's surrender, promising to treat the garrison with the honors of war. Romberg, standing on the city's ramparts, the Baltic wind whipping his gray hair, refused, vowing to defend Stettin to the last man. An hour later, Lassalle's emissary returned with a dire threat. If by 8 a.m. you have not surrendered, the Town will be bombarded by our artillery and stormed by 50,000 men. The garrison will be put to the sword, and the town will be plundered for 24 hours. The message was a bluff. LaSalle had no such army, but Romberg, alarmed, consulted Stettin's civic leaders, who urged capitulation to spare the city. That night, under the flickering light of oil lamps, the surrender was finalized. The next morning, Stettin's garrison marched out in perfect order, their boots echoing on the cobblestones, and laid down their arms before the French. When Romberg saw LaSalle's tiny force, his face fell. Humiliation replaced defiance. He had surrendered a fortress of 10,000 to a mere 500, a blunder that made him a laughingstock across Europe. LaSalle became a national hero, celebrated inside the French newspapers, while Romberg faced a court-martial in 1809. Convicted of cowardice, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, but died 2 months later, a broken man. Stettin's fall marked a low point in Prussian military history, a stark contrast to its glory days under Frederick the Great. The Prussian army, once the envy of Europe, had stagnated by 1806, its officer corps dominated by aging aristocrats, like Romberg, who failed to adapt to Napoleon's innovative tactics. Stettin's strategic importance as a Baltic port made its loss a significant blow, cutting off Prussian access to British supplies. Daily life in Stettin during the siege would have been tense. Merchants hoarded goods, fearing plunder, while families huddled in cellars, praying for deliverance. LaSalle's bluff reflects the psychological warfare of the era, a tactic Napoleon often used to intimidate larger forces. Prussian military reforms after 1806, led by figures like Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, would eventually revive the army, contributing to Napoleon's defeat in 1813 to 1815. The Hunt brothers' silver market. Crash in the 1970s, the United States was a nation grappling with economic upheaval. Stagflation, oil crises, and a declining dollar shook the confidence of its wealthiest citizens. Among them were the Hunt brothers, Nelson, William, and Lamar, sons of oil tycoon H.L. Hunt, one of the world's richest men. H.L. Hunt had amassed a fortune through the East Texas oil field, and his sons inherited both his wealth and his ambition. Nelson, the eldest, was a maverick, striking oil in Libya and amassing billions. But he was also a paranoid crackpot, fearing a U.S. government conspiracy to seize his wealth. To protect it, he turned to silver, a tangible asset he believed would shield him from economic collapse. He persuaded his brothers to join him in an audacious plan to corner the global silver market. The Hunt brothers began their silver buying spree in the early 1970s, purchasing futures contracts and physical silver at a relentless pace. By 1979, they had amassed 100 million troy ounces, nearly 7 million pounds, almost half the world's transportable supply. The air in their Dallas offices was thick with tension, the scent of ink and cigar smoke mingling as they poured over. Market reports, their desks littered with silver ingots and financial ledgers. Their speculation drove silver prices from $6 an ounce in early 1979 to over $50 by January 1980, an 800% spike. The brothers made $4 billion in paper profits, but their actions created a massive asset bubble, one that would inevitably burst. The ripple effects were global. In New York, jewelers melted down silverware to meet demand, while in London, thieves targeted silver heirlooms, driving a wave of crime. Tiffany & Co.'s ran ads decrying the Hunts' speculation, which made silver unaffordable for consumers. The Federal Reserve, tasked with stabilizing markets, intervened with a targeted rule. Banks were banned from lending to precious metal speculators. On March 27, 1980, known as Silver Thursday, the bubble burst. Silver prices collapsed overnight, and the Hunts lost over $1 billion in a single day. They pledged most of their assets as collateral for a rescue loan, but their wealth continued to erode through the 1980s, falling from $5 billion to less than $1 billion by 1985. The final blow came in 1988, when the brothers lost a lawsuit accusing them of conspiracy in their silver speculation. They faced hundreds of millions in fines and liabilities, Nelson Hunt, the mastermind, was hit hardest, filing for the largest personal bankruptcy in U.S. history. His assets, oil fields, a lavish Dallas mansion, a bowling alley, and a $12 million coin collection, were seized and sold to satisfy creditors. From visionary genius to crackpot loser, Nelson's fall was a cautionary tale of greed and hubris, a modern-day Icarus who flew too close to the sun and crashed spectacularly. Let's delve into the economic context of the 1970s. The U.S. had abandoned the gold standard in 1971, leading to currency instability and inflation, which fueled the Hunt's paranoia. Silver's role as a hedge against inflation made it an attractive target, but their aggressive buying disrupted industries like photography. Silver was key for film and electronics. The Hunt's actions also reflect the era's speculative frenzy. Similar bubbles emerged in oil and real estate. Daily life in Dallas during their spree would have been marked by ostentatious wealth, private jets, cattle ranches, and glittering galas, contrasting with the economic struggles of ordinary Americans. The Federal Reserve's intervention highlights the government's role in curbing market excesses, a policy that would later influence responses to the 2008 financial crisis. Vortigern and the Saxon betrayal. In the 5th century, the Roman province of Britannia was a land in turmoil, its once mighty legions withdrawn by 410 AD to defend the crumbling empire elsewhere. The Romano-Britons, left to fend for themselves, faced relentless raids by Picts from the north and Saxons from across the North Sea. The air in Britannia was heavy with the scent of damp earth and burning thatch, as villages were sacked and farmlands abandoned. A leader named Vortigern, likely a Romano-British noble, emerged as a central figure, tasked with defending the province. In a desperate bid to protect his people, Vortigern made a catastrophic decision. He hired Saxon mercenaries, led by chieftains, Hengist and Horsa, to settle in Britannia and fight off other barbarians in exchange for land and supplies. The Saxons arrived in the 430s, settling in the southeast, likely in Kent. At first, they honored their agreement, repelling Pictish raids. With brutal efficiency, their longships a fearsome sight along the coast, but tensions soon arose. The Saxons, accustomed to a warrior culture of mead halls and blood feuds, complained that the Romano-Britons had skimped on promised supplies, grain, livestock, and coin. Vortigern arranged a conference to resolve the dispute, inviting native nobles to meet with Hengist and Horsa. The meeting, held in a wooden hall under a gray sky, was meant to forge peace. Instead, it became a massacre. The Saxons, in a shocking betrayal, drew their seaxes, short swords, mid-conference, and slaughtered the Britons, sparing only Vortigern, who was reduced to their puppet. Declaring the treaty void, the Saxons launched a massive invasion, joined by Angles from Schleswig-Holstein and Jutes from Jutland. Their goal was to conquer Britannia, displace the locals, and settle the land with Germanic peoples. Vortigern, a tragic loser, was forced to cede southeastern England, his authority shattered. The invasion lasted decades, with the Anglo-Saxons overrunning half the province by 500 AD, until the Britons won a pivotal victory at the Battle of Mons Badonicus, often linked to the mythological King Arthur. This battle, likely fought near modern-day Bath, halted the Saxon advance temporarily, allowing Britain settlements to reclaim some lost lands. But the reprieve was short-lived. The Anglo-Saxons resumed their conquest, eventually dominating what is now England, pushing the Britons into Cornwall and Wales. Vortigern's legacy is one of catastrophic failure, his decision to hire mercenaries, unleashing a cultural transformation that erased Romano-British identity in much of the island. The Anglo-Saxon settlement laid the foundations for modern England, their language evolving into Old English, their laws and customs shaping British society. Let's explore the post-Roman context of Britannia. The withdrawal of Roman legions left a power vacuum, with local leaders like Vortigern struggling to maintain order. The Romano-British economy collapsed without imperial support. Villas were abandoned, trade routes faltered, and coinage vanished, forcing a return to barter. Saxon culture, with its emphasis on kinship and warrior bands, clashed with the Romanized Britons, who still clung to Latin literacy and Christian faith. Archaeological evidence, like the Sutton Hoo ship burial, reveals the richness of Anglo-Saxon material culture: gold brooches, intricate helmets, and runestones, while Briton resistance is evidenced by fortified hill forts like Cadbury Castle, a possible site of Mons Badonicus. The Arthurian legend, though mythic, reflects a real cultural memory of resistance against the invaders. Coca-Cola's missed opportunity with Pepsi in the early 20th century. Coca-Cola reigned supreme as the world's leading soft drink, its Atlanta headquarters a symbol of American innovation. Created in 1886 by John Stith Pemberton, Coke had become a cultural icon, its syrupy sweetness sold in glass bottles across the globe. Pepsi, by contrast, was a struggling upstart, invented in 1893 by Caleb Bradham in North Carolina. By the 1920s, Pepsi was a niche drink, its market tiny, its finances shaky. The air in American soda fountains was sweet with the scent of syrup and ice as families sipped Coke, unaware of the rival lurking in the shadows. Charles Guth, president of Loft Inc., a candy manufacturer with soda fountains in its stores, sought a discount on Coca-Cola syrup in the early 1920s. When Coca-Cola refused, Guth saw an opportunity. Pepsi had entered bankruptcy in 1923, and Guth bought it for $10,500, equivalent to about $190,000 in 2023. He tasked his chemists with reformulating Pepsi to mimic Coke's taste, aiming to undercut the giant. Within 2 years, Guth turned Pepsi around, making it profitable by 1925. Over the next decade, Pepsi was offered to Coca-Cola for purchase multiple times, but the company declined each offer, a decision they would come to regret as one of history's great corporate blunders. By 1936, Pepsi was the second largest soda company, selling 500 million bottles annually, its blue and red logo a growing presence in American diners. Loft Inc. sued Guth for breach of fiduciary duty in 1939, taking Pepsi from him and focusing solely on the soda business, spinning off non-soda assets in 1941. Pepsi continued to grow, merging with Frito-Lay in 1965 to form PepsiCo, a powerhouse that eclipsed Coca-Cola in sales by the 1980s. In 2005, PepsiCo surpassed Coca-Cola in market value, a stunning reversal for a company once dismissed as irrelevant. Coca-Cola's refusal to buy Pepsi in the 1920s became a legendary loss, a missed chance to eliminate a rival that would challenge its dominance for decades. Let's delve into the soda industry's evolution and the cultural context of the 1920s. The Prohibition era, 1920-1933, boosted soda consumption as Americans sought non-alcoholic alternatives, making soda fountains social hubs. Coca-Cola's marketing, with its iconic Santa Claus ads, cemented its dominance, but its refusal to innovate, such as adopting Pepsi's larger 12-ounce bottles, allowed the rival to gain ground. Pepsi's strategy of targeting African-American consumers in the 1940s, a demographic ignored by Coke, further expanded its market. The Cola Wars of the 1980s, including the infamous Pepsi Challenge taste tests, highlight how Pepsi leveraged Coca-Cola's early misstep. Daily life in 1920s America, flappers, jazz, and the rise of consumer culture provides a vibrant backdrop for this corporate rivalry. Shah Muhammad II versus Genghis Khan, the Khwarezmian Empire in 1218, was a thriving realm, stretching from modern-day Afghanistan to Georgia, its cities like Samarkand and Bukhara bustling hubs of trade along the Silk Road. Shah Muhammad II, who ruled from 1200 to 1220, presided over a prosperous but fragile empire, its diverse peoples, Turks, Persians, and Arabs, united by Islam but divided by local loyalties. The air in Bukhara was rich with the scent of spices, silk, and camel caravans, its grand mosque a testament to the empire's wealth. But Muhammad's reign was about to collide with history's most fearsome conqueror, Genghis Khan, the Mongol leader whose empire stretched from China to the Caspian Sea. Genghis Khan, born Temujin in 1162, had united the Mongol tribes through a mix of diplomacy and brutality, forging a disciplined army of horsemen unmatched in speed and ferocity. In 1218, while campaigning in China, he sent an embassy and trade mission to Muhammad, seeking to establish diplomatic and trade ties. The delegation included envoys and merchants bearing valuable goods, silk, jade, and furs, intended to open relations with the Khwarezmian Empire. But Muhammad, suspicious of Mongol intentions, had one of his governors halt the embassy at the border, accuse it of espionage, arrest its members, and seize its goods. When Genghis sent 3 more envoys to demand the governor's punishment, Muhammad executed them and the earlier embassy, a grave insult in Mongol culture, where envoys were sacrosanct. Genghis Khan, enraged, paused his Chinese campaign and mobilized over 100,000 men against the Khwarezmian Empire. Though outnumbered by Muhammad's forces, the Mongols struck in 1218 with a whirlwind campaign, their horse archers moving with devastating speed. They sacked Samarkand, Urgench, and Bukhara, massacring entire populations. Ancient sources estimate millions died, a death toll equivalent to 278 million in the 20th century. Muhammad fled, hounded by Mongol generals Subutai and Jebe, who chased him across his empire. Exhausted and abandoned, he died on a small Caspian island in 1220 as his pursuers closed in. At Bukhara's smoldering Grand Mosque, Genghis declared himself the flail of God, a divine punishment for the Khwarezmian sins. Muhammad II's provocation turned him into an epic loser, his empire reduced to a depopulated wasteland, its libraries burned, its people enslaved. The Mongol invasion reshaped Central Asia, paving the way for the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability that boosted Silk Road trade, but at a horrific human cost. Let's explore the Khwarezmian Empire's culture and the Mongol war machine. Bukhara was a center of Islamic scholarship, its libraries housing thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, and poetry, many of which were lost in the Mongol sack. The Khwarezmian military relied on heavy cavalry and fortified cities, but lacked the cohesion of the Mongols, whose tactics, feigned retreats, psychological terror, and the use of captives as human shields were revolutionary.
Daily life under Muhammad involved bustling bazaars, intricate tile work, and the call to prayer, a vibrant world obliterated by Mongol savagery. The invasion's impact on global population and trade routes underscores its scale, while Genghis's
chilling quotes reveal his worldview, a mix of pragmatism and divine retribution.
Franz Reichelt's parachute. Disaster Paris in 1912 was a city of innovation and elegance, its boulevards lined with Art Nouveau architecture, its cafes buzzing with artists and inventors.
The Eiffel Tower, completed in 1889, stood as a symbol of modernity, its iron lattice piercing the sky. Franz Reichelt, an Austrian-born French tailor, was one of the city's dreamers, obsessed with flight since childhood. The invention of the airplane in 1903 had sparked a wave of aviation fever, but early pilots faced a deadly risk. If their planes failed, they had no way to survive a fall. Reichelt set out to solve this problem, aiming to invent a parachute suit for pilots, spurred by the Aero Club de France's 1911 offer of a 10,000 franc prize for a successful design. Reichelt's suit was a bulky contraption, a cloak with a silken hood, weighing 20 pounds, with a surface area of 340 square feet. He tested it repeatedly on dummies thrown from his 5th-floor apartment in Paris's 16th arrondissement, but each test failed, the dummies crashing to the cobblestones below. Undeterred, Reichelt petitioned the Paris police for permission to test his suit from the Eiffel Tower, claiming he would use a dummy. On February 4, 1912, at 8 a.m., a crowd gathered at the tower, the air crisp with winter frost, the scent of coal smoke lingering. Journalists and onlookers watched as Reichelt arrived, clad in his parachute suit, his wavy brown hair tousled by the wind. To the crowd's shock, there was no dummy. Reichelt intended to jump himself. Friends and journalists pleaded with him to stop, but he brushed them off, climbing the tower's stairs with a cheery, "À bientôt." At the first deck, 200 feet above the frozen ground, he stepped onto a stool atop a table by the guardrail. Two film crews, one on the ground, one on the tower, captured the moment as he leapt at 8:22 a.m. The suit failed spectacularly, offering no resistance, and Reichelt plummeted, his body striking the ground with a sickening thud, leaving a 6-inch crater. His spine and skull were crushed, and he died instantly. Unbeknownst to him, just 2 days earlier, an American had successfully parachuted from the Statue of Liberty using a half-spherical backpack parachute, the design that would become standard. Reichelt's fall turned him from a hopeful inventor into a clownish loser, his courage overshadowed by his recklessness. His death, captured on film, became a grim lesson in the dangers of unchecked ambition, though his dream of saving pilots eventually bore fruit with modern parachutes. The Wright brothers' 1903 flight had ignited global interest in aviation, but early planes were death traps, wooden frames, unreliable engines, and no safety mechanisms. The Aero Club de France, founded in 1898, was a hub for inventors, offering prizes to spur innovation. Reichelt's suit, inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. Vinci's parachute sketches was one of many failed designs. Others included rigid frames and gas-filled balloons. Parisian life in 1912 was vibrant. Women in hobble skirts sipped absinthe in Montmartre, while men debated politics in salons. The Eiffel Tower, once derided as an eyesore, had become a stage for daring feats, from early aviators to stuntmen, making Reichelt's jump a public spectacle. Newsreels of his fall shocked Europe, underscoring the era's fascination with progress and its perils. Napoleon's Russian campaign failure. In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte was at the zenith of his power, his empire stretching from Spain to the borders of Russia. Paris was a city of triumph, its streets lined with victory arches, its air filled with the scent of gunpowder and roses from celebratory parades. But Napoleon's ambition knew no bounds, and he set his sights on Russia, aiming to force Tsar Alexander I into submission and secure his continental dominance. On June 24, 1812, he crossed the Niemen River with the Grande Armée, a colossal force of 685,000 men from across Europe, the largest army the world had ever seen. The Russian campaign, however, would turn him from a spectacular winner into a spectacular loser, a fall that began his exile to St. Helena. Napoleon's first mistake was his choice of subordinates. He appointed his inexperienced stepson, Prince Eugene, to a major command, who allowed the Russian army under General Kutuzov to retreat without engaging. The Russians adopted a scorched earth strategy, burning crops and villages as they withdrew, leaving the French to march through a wasteland. The air was thick with smoke, the ground littered with ash and the bones of livestock, as Napoleon's men, plagued by hunger and dysentery, pressed on. He had planned to halt at Smolensk for winter quarters, but after capturing the city, he pushed on to Moscow, hoping for a decisive victory. At the Battle of Borodino on September 7, 1812, he won a Pyrrhic victory, losing 30,000 men to the Russians' 44,000. At the critical moment, he hesitated to send in his elite Imperial Guard, allowing the battered Russians to retreat. When Napoleon entered Moscow on September 14th, the city was eerily silent, its wooden buildings abandoned, its streets smelling of dust and decay. He assumed the Russians would sue for peace, but fires, likely set by Russian agents, engulfed the city, leaving the French without shelter as winter loomed. The Tsar refused to negotiate, and by October, Napoleon ordered a retreat. His choice of route was disastrous. He marched through storm-ravaged lands, while a milder route saw little snow. The retreat became a nightmare. Cossacks harried the EE columns, winter froze the men, and starvation claimed thousands. Of the 685,000 who marched in, only 35,000 Frenchmen returned under Napoleon's command. Over 400,000 died, the rest deserted or switched sides.
Napoleon's quip, "From the sublime to the ridiculous, it is only one step," captured the campaign's absurdity. The Russian campaign marked the beginning of Napoleon's end, his empire unraveling as European powers united against him,
leading to his exile in 1815. It was a monumental loss, not just of men, but of prestige, reshaping Europe's balance of power. The continental system, Napoleon's blockade against Britain, had strained relations with Russia, prompting the invasion. Russian culture under Alexander I was a blend of Western influence and Slavic tradition. Nobles spoke French, while peasants endured serfdom, their lives marked by vodka, rye bread, and Orthodox faith. The Grande Armée's diversity, French, Italians, Germans, Poles, created logistical challenges, as did the harsh Russian climate, where temperatures dropped to 30 degrees Celsius. Borodino's aftermath, documented in Tolstoy's War and Peace, reveals the human cost. Wounded soldiers froze in the fields, their cries echoing in the snow. The campaign's impact on European nationalism, particularly in Germany and Spain, fueled resistance against Napoleon, setting the stage for his downfall. Captain Kidd's fall from grace. In the late 17th century, New York City was a bustling colonial port, its docks alive with the scent of tar, salt water, and rum, its streets lined with wooden taverns and merchant houses. William Kidd, born around 1645 in Scotland, was one of its most charismatic figures, a socialite, philanthropist, and friend to 3 colonial governors. Kidd played a key role in building Trinity Church, a cornerstone of New York's religious life, his name etched in its donor records. But his life took a dark turn, transforming him from a respected citizen into the notorious pirate Captain Kidd, a tragic loser whose corpse would rot in a gibbet on the Thames. Kidd's maritime career began as a privateer. In 1689, the governor of Nevis commissioned him to fight the French, granting him a letter of marque to prey on their ships. In 1695, his mission expanded. He received a roving commission to hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean, a hotbed of lawlessness where corsairs preyed on Mughal trade routes. Kidd sailed from London on the Adventure Galley, a 34-gun ship with a 150-man crew, but his voyage was cursed from the start. He offended a Royal Navy captain by failing to salute, leading to half his crew being pressed into naval service. Isai, New York, he replenished his ranks with hardened criminals and ex-pirates, a volatile mix. By the time he reached the Comoros Islands, a third of his crew had died of cholera, and he found no pirates to hunt. Under pressure from his mutinous crew, Kidd turned to piracy, attacking ships outside his commission's scope. In 1698, he sealed his fate by capturing the Quedar Merchant, a British East India Company ship laden with silk and gold. The powerful company lobbied for his arrest, branding him an outlaw. When Kidd returned to the American colonies in 1699, attitudes toward piracy had hardened. Once tolerated, pirates now faced crackdowns as Britain sought to secure its trade routes. Arrested in Boston, Kidd was shipped to London, his former allies abandoning him. Tried and convicted, he was hanged on May 23, 1701, his body left in a cage on the Thames as a warning to others, the stench of decay a grim reminder of his fall. Kidd's story is one of misfortune and misjudgment, a man caught between privateering and piracy in an era of shifting norms. His legacy endures in pirate lore, though much of it, buried treasure, swashbuckling exploits, is myth. The late 17th century saw piracy flourish in the Indian Ocean, where Mughal ships carried immense wealth, attracting rogues like Kidd. Privateering, a legal form of piracy, blurred the line between patriot and criminal. But by 1700, Britain's crackdown reflected growing imperial control. New York in Kidd's time was a melting pot. Dutch, English, and African influences mingled in markets selling whale oil, furs, and molasses. Kidd's trial in London's Old Bailey was a public spectacle, reflecting the era's harsh justice. Pirates were often gibbeted to deter others. Archaeological finds, like the Quedar Merchant's wreck off the Dominican Republic, confirm Kidd's activities, while his philanthropy at Trinity Church highlights his dual nature as a man of faith and infame. Al-Musta'sim and the fall of Baghdad in 1258 was a shadow of its former glory, once the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. the Islamic world's most prosperous empire. Under Caliph al-Musta'sim Billah, 1213–1258, the city was a center of learning, its house of wisdom housing manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. But the Abbasid Caliphate had declined, its power eroded by Turkish and Persian sultans who ruled in the caliph's name, reducing al-Musta'sim to a ceremonial figurehead. The air in Baghdad was rich with the scent of ink, parchment, and the Tigris River, its markets bustling with silk, spices, and glassware, despite the empire's weakened state. The Mongols, under Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu, turned their gaze to the Middle East in the 1250s. After destroying the Assassins, a murderous cult that had terrorized the region for over a century, Hulagu demanded al-Musta'sim's submission. The caliph, surrounded by ineffectual advisors, rejected the demand with bluster, ignoring warnings of Mongol savagery. He believed Baghdad's walls, reinforced over centuries, were impregnable, and that the Islamic world would rally to his aid. Neither belief proved true. In January 1258, Hulagu's army besieged Baghdad, the air thick with the dust of marching hooves and the cries of terrified citizens. After a 12-day siege, the city fell, its defenses crumbling under Mongol trebuchets and psychological terror. The Mongols sacked Baghdad with ruthless efficiency, massacring tens of thousands. Some estimates suggest up to 200,000 died. They burned the House of Wisdom, its priceless manuscripts fueling the flames, the Tigris running black with ink. Al-Musta'sim was captured, but Mongol tradition forbade spilling royal blood. Instead, they rolled him in a carpet and had their army ride over him, trampling him to death, a humiliating end for the last Abbasid caliph. Baghdad, once a beacon of Islamic civilization, was reduced to ash, its libraries lost, its population decimated. The fall of Baghdad marked the end of the Abbasid Caliphate, a cultural catastrophe that weakened the Islamic world for centuries. Though a symbolic caliphate later emerged in Cairo, let's explore the Abbasid Caliphate's golden age and the Mongol impact. At its peak under Harun al-Rashid, 786–809, Baghdad was a global center of knowledge, translating Greek, Persian, and Indian texts, advancing science and philosophy. By al-Musta'sim's time, the caliphate was a rump state, its authority symbolic, its military reliant on mercenaries. The Mongols' siege tactics, using captured civilians as human shields, spreading terror through massacres, were honed over decades, as seen in their earlier conquests of China and Khwarezm. Daily life in Baghdad before the siege involved poetry recitals, bustling souks, and the call to prayer, a vibrant culture obliterated by Hulagu's wrath. The fall of Baghdad also shifted Islamic power to the Mamluks in Egypt, who defeated the Mongols at Ain Jalut in 1260, preserving Islam's heartland.